Well, let's see. Look at note number 13. All 10 of Abraham's post-flood ancestors, even Noah, were alive for his early life. There is a discrepancy about Terah's age at the birth of Abram. I have marked on my chart that Terah was 70 when Abram was born. You see that on there? There is an interesting note in one of Henry Morris's books, and it's listed there. What's the name of the book? I forgot to... the Genesis record, where he explains about this controversy about how old was Terah at Abram's birth. Terah might have been 130 when Abram was born. Either 70 or 130. There's a 60-year discrepancy in there, okay, about Abram's birth. So you just need to be aware. I'd recommend you get the book noted there and read that passage if you want to know, because some people may nail you on that, and you need to be aware. You say, oh yeah, I've heard about that controversy. I read all the stuff and decided to go with the 70, though I'm aware that it really could be 130. That's about the only date I'm aware of where there's a real discrepancy in the genealogy, and it'd be worth reading to notes just so you can say, yes, I've read that. I know about it. Okay. Shem, though, lived long enough, certainly to know Abraham and Isaac, and possibly Jacob, depending upon which date you put for Abram's birth. It may slide the scale over 60 years if you use the 130 for Terah's age when Abram was born. And it goes into all the genealogy stuff. It gets a little complicated, but it's interesting to study.
How did Shem know Isaac when he wasn't allowed to go into Israel? He was in Iran.
Shem was?
Yeah, he didn't come in.
They could have gone anywhere. These people could have gone anywhere. They had the whole world. Shem and these guys. They were allowed to go anywhere. Now, later, Abraham was called out of Ur of the Chaldees, which is over in Babylon, Baghdad, basically, to come over there. But nobody knows where Shem lived, or Noah. How long did Noah live after the flood? Where did he live? What did he do?
God didn't allow him to go into Israel. He took his dad Terah with him, but against God's...
Right, against God's judgment. You're right.
So I know he didn't take Shem.
Well, Shem might have already been there. Maybe that's where Shem lived. When Abraham went to Israel, he met a guy named Melchizedek, the Ancient of Days, without father or mother. Well, since everybody else probably still had their father and mother still alive, to meet somebody who didn't, some people think Noah or Shem was Melchizedek. I wouldn't be dogmatic about it, but that is a very interesting theory and certainly a possibility. And Melchizedek lived in Jerusalem. At the time, it wasn't a city. All right, while we're on the subject of what did Noah and Shem do after the flood, I mean, they did live a long time. You got to keep in mind, they're living on a devastated planet. Everything is destroyed. It's like Gilligan's Island. You got nothing to work with. So probably just survival was a full-time job for just about everybody. Kind of like the pioneers, Daniel Boone and those guys, you know. You work 16 hours a day just to get food on the table. That would certainly be the case for the first 100 years after the flood, maybe. I don't know. But I'm sure it was a difficult life for a while. But in Numbers chapter 6, it says, "They shall put my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them," God said. In 1 Kings chapter 9, the Lord said unto him, "I've heard thy prayer and thy supplication that thou hast made before me. I have hallowed this house which thou hast built to put my name there." God says, I'm going to put my name right there. 2 Kings chapter 21. "And he built altars in the house of the Lord, of which the Lord said, In Jerusalem will I put my name." Stay with me here now. 2 Kings chapter 21. "In Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, will I put my name forever." 2 Chronicles 33. "In Jerusalem will I put my name forever." You say, who cares? Well, watch this now. If you look in Psalms chapter 119 in your Bible, you may have a Bible that tells the Hebrew alphabet. I think there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. The letter Shin, S-C-H-I-N, with those this is the Hebrew letter that is the single letter that represents God. If they want to say God's name in one letter, they write this Shin. You follow this now? Notice the shape of the Shin. It's 3 lines coming up kind of at an angle. Notice the valleys in Jerusalem. The city of Jerusalem with the valleys is laid out in a Shin. Go to any Hebrew temple, go to any Jewish house. Almost all of them on their doorway someplace will have a little Shin. That's God's name. And God said, I will put my name in Jerusalem. It's right there. Pastor friend of mine from Milton showed me this. He said he was in Israel taking a tour with a secular tour group. He'd been on the Christian tour groups a couple of times. He decided to go with the secular group. And this Jewish guide is showing him around. And the Jewish guide knew he was a pastor and said, well, Pastor, do you have anything else to add to our tour here? He said, sure, put the map of Jerusalem back up there, would you please? He said, you see this valley right here, and this valley right here, and this valley right here? And the guide said, oh, it's a Shin. He'd lived there all of his life and never saw it. So some people think Noah, excuse me, some people think Noah and or Shem, not Shem, Shem lived in what today is Jerusalem. If one of those guys was Melchizedek, that certainly would be a good type of Christ. Noah would certainly be interesting, having lived through the flood. Now, I don't get dogmatic and I don't preach it that it's a fact, but it's just an interesting sidelight. Since we're chasing all the rabbits on this course, that's something fascinating to study. God did put his name in Jerusalem. Later on, a fellow named Abraham went to sacrifice his son. He took his boy and the wood and climbed up a mountain. Guess which mountain? Right in Jerusalem. Later on, Jesus was crucified. Same mountain. Right in Jerusalem. All this happens in the same place. And it could be that that's where Noah and Shem went and lived. Now, some people think that Noah and Shem built the Great Pyramid. I don't know that that's true, but that's an interesting thought. Somebody certainly built the Great Pyramid. It's a strange one compared to the other pyramids, and I think it's worthy of study. One guy, Hank Hanegraaff, gets all upset with me because I mentioned pyramidology. He never has called me, but he's blasted me several times on his radio program, The Bible Answer Man. And I tell everybody, well, tell him to call me. I can defend my position. In my seminar, I say, here's what some people think, that the Great Pyramid might be a structure, a temple to the Lord. It's got all kinds of Christian symbolism in there. Some people think it's just a heathen symbol. Some people think it's one of the star group, from Orion, I believe it is. I don't know. I just think if you're going to be a student of any subject, you ought to look at all the sides of it. So I just say, hey, here's what some people think about the pyramid, the Great Pyramid. So it could be indeed the temple to the Lord or a witness to the Lord in the land of Egypt. Don't know. But Shem and Noah certainly did something. I think, if nothing else, they took incredible wisdom and knowledge that had been gained in the 1600 years before the flood, and they tried to pass it on to the next generation. Now, today there are all sorts of Masonic lodges type things, who think they have the wisdom of the ancients. You got to be really careful about going down that road, because that's certainly, the average Mason doesn't know what he's in until he gets up to the top and finds out he's been in a satanic organization all of his life. They won't know that, and it's hard to tell them that because they get mad at you. But read the book by Schoenbeam, or I will get into that in video number 5. All right, Shem lived long enough to know Abraham, Isaac, and possibly Jacob, depending on where you put Terah's age at Abraham's birth. Interesting verse in the Bible. Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, Jacob got married and then got married again, and his 4 wives had a contest as who could have the most kids. The story when you read through Genesis. He ended up with 13 kids. 1 girl, 12 boys. They became known as the 12 tribes of Israel. Those boys got mad at their brother and sold him into slavery. Which brother was that? Joseph, right. Sold him to be a slave. Joseph was down to Egypt, ends up getting in trouble. He's trying to be nice, but they end up throwing him in jail for Potiphar's wife who tries to seduce him. And an interesting story there. He just does what's right and ends up in jail for 17 years. He rises to the top and becomes the jailer's assistant, even though he's got to stay in jail. The jailer gives him run of the jail. And he interprets the dreams and all this kind of stuff. Bottom line is, eventually, Joseph becomes vice Pharaoh, or whatever they called him, okay? And so he becomes the assistant to Pharaoh. And Joseph sends his brothers back to get